Okay, students, here's part 2 of modeling our designs in the 3D software Sketchup. So now that you've modeled your rectangle shape, we're going to start looking at how to turn that into a specific design for a car. The very first thing is that we're going to create something called a guideline along the front edge of that rectangle using a tool called the tape measure tool. So I've got some images here showing the tape measure tool, but let's flip over to SketchUp. So the tape measure tool right here. When you select that tool, notice how it's got a little plus sign on it. If you don't see that plus sign, just tap the control button. So there I've tapped the control button, it turns it off. I tap it again, turn it on. You have to have that plus sign in order to create these things called guidelines. See right down here at the bottom it says control equals toggle create guides. That just means tap the control button to turn on guides. And we see that by the little plus sign. So I'm going to set this along the bottom front edge.
Jason Pratt, please call the main office. Jason Pratt, please call the main office.
Okay, thank you for that announcement. Okay, so I'm going to set this along this front line of my rectangle, and I'm just going to double click with the mouse and see how it's created this guideline here. Guidelines are sort of like temporary lines that like help us out during the design and construction process. Now, I'm going to kind of rotate this. I'm going to use my pan tool to kind of scoot it over a little bit. Let's flip back to our instructions. Okay, I just talked about the tape measure tool and that getting that plus sign, setting down that line there. Now, we want to go ahead and view our model from the front. So your views toolbar is up at the top of your screen. There are our views. Let's look at the front view. Okay, there's our model in the front view. So I'm going to kind of zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to use this pan tool. Okay, basically what we're going to do is we are going to copy and paste 2 copies of this model, this rectangle, along our lines. We're going to end up with something that looks like this. Now, if I select on this thing, when I click on it, it should be turning blue everywhere because you should have already highlighted it and right-clicked and made it into a group, right? You should have already done that. So now if I just click on it and then on the keyboard I push Control-C, that's copy, Control-V is paste, and I'm going to place it along this dotted line here. I'm going to Control-V again and paste another copy. Okay? So I've got myself 3 copies along that dotted line there. See that? Okay, so that's where you should be. Now, we're going to start dealing with our second rectangle. We're going to double click on it in order to edit the model. And we're going to get this funny dotted line box that pops up around it. So I'll grab my black selection arrow, I double click on this, see a single click and it's blue. Double click and it selects it, and we can actually change things about it. It's super important that you've double clicked on it and you're seeing this. If you're not seeing that and you start drawing what we're about to draw, it's not going to do what we're trying to do, and you're going to have to go back and redo. Okay? So, what we want to do is we want to mark that front edge up at 3/4 of an inch from the bottom. Now, this step refers back to the very beginning, right to here. We want this measurement, and hopefully you've measured that with a ruler. It should be about 3/4 of an inch. But what we're going to do is we're going to mark a line right there so we know how to draw in this angled line correctly. Okay? Let me come back down here. Page 12, I think, is where we were. Yeah. Okay. So we want to come up from the bottom 3/4 of an inch. So basically, we're going to use that tape measure tool again. Grab the tape measure tool. I'm going to zoom in. Okay. I'm going to click down here at the bottom, and it starts pulling up a dotted line, just like the dotted line we just barely created. And I'm going to type in 3/4, enter. So you see that what I typed ended up in the bottom right-hand corner, but this is not a text input box that you can click on. Do not click right here. That'll ruin it. Let me undo and redo. I'll sort of redo this step. There we are. So I double clicked. It's ready to edit. I grab the tape measure, click on that bottom line and drag up, and then you just type 3/4, enter. That's 3/4 of an inch. Now we're going to use the line tool to just draw in this diagonal line. So I grab my line tool, start at the corner, and I come right down there. You should be seeing a red X that says intersection. So I click right there. Now that shape, that is the shape of our balsa wood blank. Okay? Now basically from here on, for the rest of this part of the step, you just want to draw in your side view of your CO2 car. Now, I'm not using like a real specific design, but I'm going to do something. So I'm going to look at it from the front. Okay, there we are. Now I'm going to go ahead and erase my guideline because I don't need that. I'm going to do something with my design like this. I'm just going to make mine kind of a stair step. Now, you shouldn't be making up a design here. You're using the design that you came up with, that I approved for your CO2 car. You're not just making this up like I am. Okay? There we go. I made that up. Grab my orbit tool. I can move that around. Now, notice how I did not draw anything above this diagonal line. On your balsa wood, this area does not exist. That's why we drew that line in there. Okay? But you've got, draw in your side view. If you're doing curves, you're going to use this arc tool. And the arc tool takes some getting used to. It takes 3 clicks to use an arc tool. Starting point, ending point, and then where do you want it to curve to. Okay? So if you're using the arc tool, just practice with it. You can combine arcs with straight lines, but pretty much I should only be seeing arcs and straight lines. I shouldn't be seeing other things, other tools that are available up here. Okay? So draw in that whole side view of your drawing. Make sure that that rectangle is still selected. You should still see those dotted lines around it showing that you are still editing that middle rectangle of your group. Okay? Now, so I did something roughly like this. Now we're ready to go to our third rectangle, and we're going to select it, and we want to view it from the top. So I come back over here. Okay, I'm going to come over to this one. I'm going to double click it. So now I've selected it, and I want to look at it from the top. So I'm in my Views toolbar. Look at it from the top. I'm going to kind of bring it to the center and zoom in on it. Now we're going to draw in our top view on this, and we can just draw it exactly on the top. Same thing like we said from the last step. We'll use straight lines and curves. I'm going to put together something that looks like this for my design, but you are using your design that you came up with that I approved. So I'm going to work my way through this. Now, I'm not going to explain everything that I'm doing here, but notice that I'm using this tape measure tool to draw myself some guidelines that are going to kind of help me know how to draw this in symmetrical. And we can talk about this in class a little bit, and I can give you some pointers. When you're using that straight line tool and you're drawing lines, you'll notice that it like wants to hang on. It's kind of sticky. To get rid of that, just hit escape and it will stop trying to do that. Okay, this is what I want for my top view. Now I'm going to go ahead and erase these guidelines that I created. We'll zoom out. We'll use this orbit tool. Black selection arrow. And we'll pan to bring it over. Zoom in a little bit. Okay, so what do we have here? We've got our 3 rectangles. This is our original. This has our side view. This has our top view. Okay, this is the end of part 2 of our design series, okay? In part 3, we'll look at how we can combine these and remove the material that we don't want to end up with our final design, okay? Follow the instructions in the packet about saving and submitting this on Blackboard. Okay, see you in the next step.